We have what is called the gold standard BRT because it has all the features that it's able to provide really fast, reliable, and very high capacity. Actually, the BRT here in Bogota is moving more than most metros around the world in terms of passengers per hour per direction.
Transport is one of the fastest growing sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. And in many cities, getting around is one of the biggest daily frustrations: congestion, pollution, and long journeys to work. But in Colombia, they've come up with a solution that's spreading around the world. I'm Jordan Dunbar, and on the climate question from the BBC World Service, we're asking, how do you move millions of people around a city quickly, cheaply, and with fewer emissions? Transport is something you've told us you want to hear more about. We previously asked which easiest climate fix you think money should be spent on, and transport was the clear winner. So to talk about this are two experts with a lot to say about the subject. Dario Hidalgo, Professor of Transport and Logistics at the Pontificia Universidad Javeriana in Bogota. Hi, Dario.
Hello from Bogota.
And Sarah Kaufman, Director of the NYU Rudin Center for Transportation in New York. Hi, Sarah.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Sarah, you are in New York, America's biggest city, nearly 8.5 million citizens. What's it like being stuck in New York traffic?
New York traffic is extremely complex, often chaotic. There's so many people and purposes competing for the same road space, trucks making deliveries, taxis picking people up and dropping people off. There are drivers full of road rage because they've been stuck in traffic who are driving aggressively. And of course, we have a very busy pedestrian network and folks who are walking to their destinations, and sometimes with the light and sometimes against the light, meaning that they're crossing at will.
Dario, you're in Bogota, Colombia's capital, home to nearly 8 million people. Is it nice and quiet? No problems with traffic?
Not at all. We only have 14% of the people going by car, but the road network is not enough. So the traffic is very slow, very noisy, and drivers are very aggressive.
Sarah, let's get into ways then that we can reduce traffic and reduce the emissions that are affecting the climate. What's the most efficient way of moving large amounts of people around a city?
The most efficient way is the metro system, which we call the subway here in New York City. Most subway trains here can carry about 1,000 people or more, which they often do during our rush hour times. It's far and away the most efficient way to move large numbers of people. Here in New York City, there are about 4.6 million riders a day on the subway and bus systems. About 2/3 of those are taking the subway. And New York is really exceptional in the numbers of people who take public transit. In terms of space efficiency, one subway line can move tens of thousands of people per hour.
So subways are the underground trains that people say around the world it might be called metros or the tube or the underground. Why don't we all just dig and have underground trains? What are the pros and cons? Talk me through each of the options.
The subway is fantastic. It is by far the fastest way to go somewhere, but it takes years and sometimes decades to complete the construction of a subway line and acquire the funding to do so, of course. Instead, we turn to buses more frequently because buses are more agile. They move people in areas not covered by subway lines, and they serve neighborhoods that are more far-flung.
Dario, just quickly, can you talk me through generally what the options are that mayors have? Buses, subways, trams?
Those are the main options, doing a metro and doing buses with priority, which we have done here in Bogota. And we also have a cable car, teleférico, which is another option for hilly areas, and it's a complement to the rest of the network. What we are talking about is public transportation. Public transportation is the option to moving around in cars, and is the option for climate and the option for congestion and the option for reduction of other nuances like traffic fatalities.
Sarah, you mentioned that the most cost-efficient way was buses. However, cost efficient is not the most sexy description. It's not like a high-speed rail or a monorail. People tend not to get that excited about them. What's the reputation of buses like?
Buses are often stuck in traffic, and they have a reputation for being slow and inefficient. But in fact, people aren't opposed to the bus, they're opposed to being stuck in traffic. And so something that we've been working on here in New York City is actually getting buses to move faster. They can be quite efficient. They can carry over 100 people per bus, and they can replace about 30 to 40 cars per bus. So adding bus priority throughout the city lets them move more efficiently on corridors where we've done this. Travel times have been reduced by about 30%. So people are moving quickly. And when you make the bus the fastest option, people will take the bus.
But Dario, you, I would say, do see buses as the supermodels of mass transit. I don't need to sell them to you. I don't want to spoil it because we're going to come to Bogota's special role in changing the reputation of buses. But first, generally, how big are the emissions savings when cities shift people out of their cars onto mass transit?
Well, the cut is by 70% per passenger kilometer. So it's an impressive reduction of emissions because you move a lot of people in the same vehicle, and then the emissions of all these engines that are replaced by just one engine, even if that engine is bigger, reduces the emissions. And if you go electric, you do much better. But electric buses are kind of a new thing. They are not the common application right now, but it's growing really fast.
So Bogota in Colombia pioneered a new system to try and reduce emissions and traffic. What is a bus rapid transit system, or BRT?
Yeah, a bus rapid transit is what Sara says, is taking the buses out of traffic and making it much more effective. What a BRT, like the one we have here in Bogota that was modeled after Curitiba in southern Brazil, it is a very special infrastructure where only the buses can run in it. We have also stations, not just bus stops. So the people pay to get to the station, not when they get to the bus. And the buses are bigger in terms of their size. We have really big buses, 25 meters long. So we have what is called the gold standard BRT because it has all the features that it's able to provide really fast, reliable, and very high capacity. Actually, the BRT here in Bogota is moving more than most metros around the world in terms of passengers per hour per direction. Of course, it has limitations. It's not the holy grail, but it's an impressive opportunity for cities like ours, which struggle for money to do the investment and the time that takes years to make the metro. We are also making the metro. It's not out of the table, but it's a combination of metro and BRT, which is creating a better opportunity for the people here in Bogota.
Well, let's talk about when the BRT or the Transmilenio launched. What problems were you trying to solve in Bogota? Why go for this option and not others?
The current network is 114 kilometers. We started with 16 kilometers 25 years ago. And what the traffic for buses before was very chaotic because there were too many buses in some sections of the city because most of the people in Bogota, more than 70% of the people uses buses every day. But these buses were old, polluting, slow. There were a lot of crashes. There were a lot of issues, and they were in general traffic. So what Transmilenio did was taking the people that was already in these buses, a lot of people, into a special infrastructure that provided a much reliable and fast and service with newer buses at that time.
So what happened when they built the Transmilenio? Because obviously it was a massive success back then, but it hasn't all been plain sailing. In later years, more recently, there were complaints of overcrowding and people weren't paying their fares. What have you learnt from these problems in the last 25 years?
Yes, well, any system, it doesn't matter the technology, needs continuity and care, and be careful with the maintenance, with the operations, and also with the expansion. and probably different governments didn't put enough focus on that, on quality and maintenance and expansion. Actually, the last expansion of the BRT was in 2012, or 13 years ago. So if you don't expand the system according to the needs, the difficulties come with this lack of expansion, overcrowding. There's difficulties with crime, and that's not acceptable in any ways. But that's what the authorities need to fix through better investment and better management.
So you can't just build it and then take your eye off the ball. You have to build it and constantly be maintaining it, making sure it's safe, cheaper, cleaner, and working.
Yes, and that's fortunately what is happening now in Bogota. We're not just expanding 56 kilometers of BRT, which is a very, very major expansion, but we are also building a 23-kilometer metro line. We are building new cable cars, a couple of lines to connect to the BRT and the metro. So it's keeping the investment going and keeping the quality as the center of your activity.
And that success has meant that you don't just work in Bogota. The bus rapid transit systems, they've spread all across the world now. And just looking at some of the facts, Jakarta in Indonesia now has the world's biggest bus rapid transit network. 251 kilometers, serving around 11 million people. And to look at the variety, my home city of Belfast in Northern Ireland, it's got a glider, a big purple glider that's entered into the city as well. So it really is in a variety of different places. It doesn't have everywhere doesn't have to be the same type of city as Bogota.
Yes, and that's something that is good about buses. They are very adaptive. You don't need to do the big thing like we needed to do it here in Bogota, because we needed to move thousands of people, but in smaller cities, in other places, you can just do some sections, but still you need kind of some basics. You need the priority where is needed. You need the buses and the quality of the buses and the reliability of the service. Those things are kind of things that you need no matter what is the size of the city.
Sarah, you're our transport expert in New York. And interestingly, it's one place where the bus rapid transit system didn't work out so well. What's working and what's not working in New York City when it comes to buses?
Sure. So true BRT systems, like the fantastic one Dario spoke about in Bogota, requires wide streets and physically separated busways and large stations as well. And New York simply does not have the widths of the street. We also have a huge number of competing uses at the curb. And so we simply don't have the physical space for a true BRT system. But we do have something that's more like a BRT light, in which we have certain corridors on the bus network that have a few elements of BRT. For example, we have dedicated busways, even if they're not physically separated. We have fare payment that happens off of the bus before people board, which cuts down the wait time at the bus stops. We also have prioritization at the traffic signals so that buses can continue through the intersection without delay. And our very exciting aspect is camera enforcement, so that we can enforce private vehicles that might be blocking busways, to force them to move out of the way, not in real time, but they receive a ticket in the mail because there's imaging on the front of the bus.
There's something new that you're trying, which isn't about building new infrastructure for buses. It's just about making buses faster, and that's congestion charging. Explain that to me.
Sure. So New York is the first city in the United States to implement congestion charging. The goal is twofold. The first goal of congestion charging is to reduce the number of private vehicles taking up space and emitting fumes into the atmosphere, so that we can allow for the prioritization of transit. The second goal is to use those funds that are the revenue from congestion pricing to improve our transit system. And we're already seeing in the first year, it was implemented in January of 2025. So we've had just over a year of the system in place. It has been a runaway success in both of those goals. The first is the revenue. About $500 million have been gained from this system, from vehicles paying $9 a day to enter the congestion zone. We've reduced traffic by about 13%. So these are people who are choosing to take mass transit instead of driving, or carpooling with colleagues or friends, or simply choosing a different way to travel into the densest street network in the whole country.
If you are a New Yorker or you're part of the New York administration, all that revenue sounds great. But I can imagine if you're a driver that doesn't live in New York or has to drive in, it's being quite controversial. People have tried to push back, right?
Yes, there's been quite a bit of opposition, especially from the state of New Jersey, which sends about 500,000 commuters into New York City every day. But in fact, the opposition has subsided somewhat because even people who continue to drive are seeing traffic speeds increase so they can accomplish their commutes much faster, about 20% faster, and sometimes up to a half reduction in their commute time. We're also seeing a better transit system, for example, where the revenue from congestion pricing is being used to build out elevators throughout the subway system, to modernize signals, and to reduce the impacts of flooding. So we'll have a simultaneous improvement in public transit as well as the reduction in traffic on the street level.
Looking at the future, we're talking about BRT and this wonderful example in Bogota and congestion charge in New York, but many of the cities and the megacities of the future are still being built. Dario, are they putting in BRT systems, or do we continue to treat the private car as king?
Unfortunately, is the second proposition, probably because most decision makers are already in car. So decision makers feel that the way they move is the way that everybody moves, and it's not the case. In Latin America, most of the people is in buses. Most of the people is walking to their destination. So those are the modes that need to be prioritized in terms of investment. But decision makers like the idea of having new expressways, new connections, new ways of moving in car, and they wrongly feel that building car lanes or expressways will solve the problem. And it has not been the case in any place in the world. There's no place that has been able to build its way out of congestion by building more traffic lanes. So it's about making the right choices in terms of sustainable mobility. New York's an excellent example, and we look up to New York. We also will like to have the congestion charge here, but the debate is kind of the same. The people in cars that oppose new charges for moving in their privilege.
Sarah, some people argue, well, why do we need to worry about public transport and problems with, climate changing emissions if so many cars are going to be electric?
Electric cars are certainly a step in the right direction in terms of emissions, but they still require the physical space and infrastructure that gas-powered or petrol-powered cars require. They are still, like gas-powered cars, only used about 5% of the day. So here in New York, vehicles are parked about 95% of the day across the United States. Of course, people use them twice a day to go to and from work frequently. Whatever the power source of the vehicle is, the efficiency in cities is really to just reduce the ownership and the usage of cars in general, so that we can have the space that is highly contested used for other purposes that might be more efficient in terms of space, that might be less emissions emitting, such as cycling or other active modes of transport. and also more economically dynamic. So things like outdoor cafes, for example. We can turn over static parking spots to more dynamic uses, and that would be better for the city, for the air quality, and of course, for the economy.
And you've been working on a project looking at the future of the bus. We're talking 10, 15 years ahead. What will it look like? Is it anything like today? Tell me what we could be seeing.
At NYU, we've been looking into the future of the bus in partnership with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. They run the Midtown Bus Terminal here in Manhattan, which is actually the busiest bus terminal in the entire world. So the experiment or the thought process is to think how we can make them be a bit safer, to operate more efficiently, and to be more attractive to potential riders. And in general, the vehicle itself will be largely the same, a large vehicle, rubber tires, flexible routing. But in fact, there will be a lot of changes in terms of how it's powered, turning over to electric power, of course. And also, we could see some levels of automation, not removing a bus driver, for example, but instead offering more efficiency in certain areas, certain corridors, such as within airport campuses or within the back end of this busy bus terminal, which is currently being reconstructed. Right now in the United States, we actually have a bus driver shortage. So adding in some levels of automation would help the operators operate in more complex street environments, whereas the automation could handle direct shuttle runs and other more straightforward tasks.
Well, I've got a final question for both of you, so try not to copy each other's answers. Dario, you are designing a city from scratch. You don't have loads of money. What would you do?
Oh, that's a wonderful question, and I feel like playing SimCity from my youth. The idea is to have a compact city. It's a city where you have mixed use and some good density, and also have public space and parks and opportunity to walk, bike lanes to be able to go safely in your bike, and an extraordinary public transportation system with the metro, with buses, with local buses that combine in a single network that provides the end-to-end connectivity. So it's having a multimodal public transportation network with a very nicely designed city for the people, not for the cars.
Sarah, what about you?
I would say that cities need to move towards multimodalism, and what is energizing to me is that younger generations, at least here in the United States, are shifting towards less interest in cars and more interest towards shared and multimodal mobility.
When we say multimodal, we mean options, right? So your bus and your tram and your subway and your bikes.
That's right. That's right. People are more willing to take the right form of transport that is appropriate for their trip. For example, if they're going to the supermarket, they may need a larger vehicle, but if they're traveling to work and it's a sunny day, a bicycle might be the best option. So giving people opportunities to travel in the way that is most appropriate for them, and dare I say, joyful. We don't need to think simply of transport as one origin to one destination, but rather how can we enjoy the journey? And so that's something I would look forward to setting up here in cities.
Amazing. Thank you both. Sarah in New York, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And Dario in Bogota, thank you.
Thank you and goodbye.
And thank you for watching. Don't forget you can subscribe to the BBC World Service YouTube channel so you don't miss a thing. And if you have a climate question of your own, then write it in the comments below and we'll answer it in a future show. I'm Jordan Dunbar. See you next time.